Hi friends, I'm Scott Giles and welcome to my video podcast. I'm calling this now Power Talk. For years, I've been doing a video podcast every Saturday afternoon at 2:30 Central Time, which I called Saturday at 2:30. This worked fine, except I now have people who routinely watch in many different time zones, and they began to complain that the title of the podcast itself was just getting to be confusing. So I've decided to rebaptize it. My newsletter for my practice is called Power Lines because my practice theme is taking control of your life through the power of your mind. So I'm going to call my podcast Power Talk. So welcome to Power Talk. I'm a life coach. I'm a consulting hypnotist. I'm a clergyman, a Unitarian Universalist minister. And I do these podcasts as a way of sharing with a wider audience than my own private clientele or the participants in my group program, my philosophy and thoughts. Today, I want to talk about living your values. This is a big deal for me. Now, it should seem absolutely obvious to most people that if you're living your life rightfully, you should do what you say and say what you mean. Know what you value and support, and then value and support those things. Sort of a no-brainer. But I was shocked as I left the academic world after graduate school when I discovered that this is often not true. A lot of people engage in what I would call doublethink, an Orwellian term, that they actually deceive themselves. And they're perfectly willing to say one thing while doing another and have no cognitive dissonance about that unless called on it, at which point they come up with some kind of a fairly facile rationalization. This was brought home to me in parish ministry. Now, I grew up in kind of a commutarian environment. And in that environment, people did do what they did say what they mean, because if they didn't, they would be called on that by other members of the community. And the covenant in the community was that that was allowed. So I went off to theological school when I felt my call to ministry. And in theological school, often the student body does form an intense community where people are pretty authentic with each other. Then I graduated, was ordained, and went into the parish ministry before beginning my 35-year community ministry as a consulting hypnotist working in healthcare. I had a 13-year career as a parish minister, and I was shocked. I discovered that people in the congregations, now I expected that they would behave like what I thought spiritual people, religiously aware people, would behave, which is that they'd be authentic, they would live their values. Think again. Not at all what I found. I discovered that people in the congregations, and I served two, but I also would occupy an officer role in the ministerial association, and so I had a chance to get a more holistic view of what was going on in many different congregations. And people were perfectly willing to advocate for fair treatment of workers on Sunday morning while systematically mistreating the church staff. They were perfectly willing to decry oppression in society while perfectly willing to practice it among their staff, their committees, and in the case of some theological schools, among the students. They would advocate for the importance of transparency in human affairs, except when they found it inconvenient, at which point they became deceptive. They would announce the importance of being honest Well, systematically breaking contracts and agreements. It was a massive shock to me that so many people I had expected to respect, actually were completely self-serving in how they organized their life and perfectly willing to advocate for values they did not practice. But I'm not beating up churches here. That's just my personal experience. Pretty much every institution does this to some degree. And the only thing, it becomes more glaring in churches because the churches pointedly say otherwise. I had a career as a chef, my very first career for 9 years. And I worked in some fine restaurants, and the menu would carefully say, about the ingredients we'd be using, except back on the line, those weren't the ingredients that were actually going into the food. Our Idaho potatoes had never been north of New York. It was that sort of thing. Um, the fresh caught lobster was not fresh caught. It came in frozen. The fresh crab cakes were made using canned crab meat. That sort of thing was going on like all the time, saying one thing, doing another. Now, my two degrees, in my first two degrees, my bachelor's and my master's degree, are in philosophy, with a strong emphasis on formal logic. Now, people will often say that philosophy is a silly thing to study because you can't do anything with the degree. That's not really true. A lot of people who go into law, into politics, have a background in philosophy. But um, one thing philosophy does teach you is the value of rigorous thought, of being consistent in what you say and also what you advocate for, and by implication, what you do. In a world where almost every social pressure seems designed to undermine personal integrity, living in accordance with your values takes deliberate thought. It will not happen by accident. And that's what I want to communicate today. I'm not just, complaining about churches and restaurants. I believe that we all should know what our values are and should live in accordance with them. Say what you mean, do what you say. But I've also become completely convinced in my almost 70 years of life that that will not happen by accident. You have to be completely intentional about seeing that you hold yourself accountable. Um, I've developed some rituals in my own life that I'll share, and perhaps this talk will encourage some of you to do the same. Now, I got this idea actually from Ben Franklin. Franklin wanted to, in the founding of the American Republic, wanted to pursue 13 virtues that he thought were very, very important. And so he carried on himself every day a little ivory plaque that he had made. Scrimshawed into it was a matrix for the 13 values and a column for each day of the week. And what he would do is when he had in the course of a day done something that captured one of those values, he would put a little pencil check in that column. And at the end of the week, he could wash the pencil off the ivory and recycle the device for the future week. In this way, he held himself accountable to pursue in his lived experience the values that he had advocated for. And so when I read that, I said, okay, this is something that I want to do. I'm not going to make an ivory plaque, but I'm going to find some way of holding myself accountable because, like I said, living in accordance with your values will not happen by accident, even if you've got the best intention in the world. It will get undermined by the society we live in, unless you deliberately hold the line. In my personal method of self-reflection, I use something called a bullet journal. And if you're curious, you can find books and YouTube videos about that. It's a technique of journal keeping created by a guy by the name of Ryder Carroll. I like it a lot. When I open my spread for the day, that is 2 facing pages, and my journal stays on my desk all during the day. One side's going to be my notes about my personal reflection in the course of the day. The other side is things that I've got to get done, my task list. But at the top of that, I put what's called a tracker. I have a row of symbols for the various things that I need to get done during the course of the day, like medicate my sick cat. But also, have I, done my spiritual exercises? Have I manifested personal integrity in the course of the day? And as I go through my day, I draw lines through the things that I check off. Yes, I've medicated the cat. Yes, I was honest in my dealings with people today. So that when I get to the end of the day and I look at that tracker, I've held myself accountable to, at least some of the time, actually do what I say I think people should do. Also in my journal, I have a list of my goals that I want to pursue. And I think it's a good thing we should all have a goals list that we review periodically. I have a list that I call the absolute yes list, the things I want in my life, and the things that I do not want in my life, my absolute no list. For example, I do not want high drama people who whine. And if I encounter someone who is a high drama person and who whines a lot, they are not going to be my friend. They are not going to get close to me. I will find a way to politely hold them at a distance. And at the end of the day, I do a bedside reflection. When I close up my desk for the day, I look at my bullet journal and how have I done on the tracker, just like Ben Franklin did with his little ivory tracker. That's important for me to note. When I go to my bed, I do some devotional reading with a couple of books that I keep bedside. And I think about my day. Have I been an authentic person that day? And if I have, I give myself a spiritual pat on the back, and if I haven't, I resolve to do better the next day. Another thing I do, and this is a technique that is widely practiced in AA, people who are battling addictions of various sorts will often carry pocket coins that remind them of certain victories that they've had. So someone who's been sober for 30 years will carry a 30-year coin as a way of reinforcing that accomplishment. And when they feel the tendency to backslide, that coin becomes an important anchor in maintaining their resolve. In my personal life, I follow the ancient Stoic philosophy, and I've talked about that here. Check out my Golden Way videos on YouTube if you want to know more about them. But there's an organization called the Daily Stoic, and that promotes Stoic philosophy, which is kind of the best of ancient Greek and Roman philosophy. And one of the things they sell are a series of coins. And every day I choose one at random and carry it with me in my trouser pocket that day, just as a way of reminding me of the principle that coin carries. For example, one of the principles is ego is the enemy, which is a Stoic idea that, give other people credit for what they do. Don't try to be completely self-serving. You'll be a better person and you'll get farther if you keep your own ego under control. The one I'm carrying today is called Memento Mori, which means remember that you will die. It's a recommendation to live every day as if it were your last. And while that doesn't mean you don't make future plans, it does mean that you don't put off to the future the pleasures, the satisfactions that you want in your life, and you don't put off to the future being a good person. You try to be a good person now. So those rituals, my tracker in my journal, my goals list, my absolute yes and no list, my bedside reflection, those are my equivalents of Ben Franklin's little ivory plaque. Being authentic, living in accordance with your values, will not happen by accident. Even if you really intend to live in accordance with your values, my experience in churches and in restaurants and elsewhere taught me that there are so many other forces that will try to get you to back down from that, that you will inevitably, in some way, back down unless you're intentional. It won't happen by accident. Therefore, be intentional. Hey, thank you for your time and attention. I will be back next week with a talk here on Power Talk with a different topic, and I hope you'll join me. It does help me if you share my videos, so please like, subscribe, and share. If I can be of help to you, don't hesitate to reach out. Stay well and stay safe.